Welcome to the Regional Ohio Growth Summit. My name is Andy O'Neill, and I am Vice Provost and Academic Dean here at the university. And I'd like to recognize very quickly Tom Grothaus. He's Academic Dean here as well. Wave your hand, Tom. And then Kevin Meager over here on the side. He's our Associate Dean here in the College of Applied Technologies. We'd like to welcome you. We're happy to have all of you on campus here, and I hope that you have the opportunity to look around and see some of the things that the University of Northwestern Ohio has to offer. I want to start off by saying that we are the single largest campus that teaches automotive, diesel, HVAC, high-performance, alternate fuels, ag in the country. So we're proud of that right here in Lima, Ohio. And that says a lot about what Dr. Jarvis's vision has been over the years. And you know, we have competition, and we always work very hard to stay ahead of our competition, and it's you know, that's challenging, but you know what? That's rewarding. Competition is always good, and I want to let you know that we will have tours of the campus after lunch if anybody wants to take a tour, so keep that in mind. And I also want to invite everyone to make sure you find your way out to the our NASCAR haulers out here and our race vehicles. We have a race team that's out there. Students, they don't have to even go to school today, but they're here because of the Auto Growth Summit. So make sure you go out. You can tour, walk through the trailer, and you can look at the cars that we have. We have, just so you know, we have three modified race teams. We have 4 stock car race teams, and we have 2 drag teams, all encompassed in our motorsports team. All right? So these are scholarship athletes, just like our basketball team or our volleyball team, soccer teams, baseball teams, whatever. So we're proud of the fact that we're keeping the industry going, the automotive industry going, and that's part of the reason why you all are here today. So make sure you go out there and take a look at that. Those young gentlemen out there are ready to talk to you and let you know a little bit about what we do. I mean, they travel everywhere. They travel down to Daytona and Volusia, Florida, the National World of Outlaws races. We go to Eldora. We go to Missouri I-55 racetrack with the one that Kenny Schrader owns, and we go to Tri-City Speedway. So we go to several different speedways across the country to give our students the information and the experience that they need for when they go out into the racing industry and get jobs. You know, our athletics are big here. I mean, we have basketball teams, we have our volleyball teams, we have soccer teams, men's and women's, we have golf, we have tennis. Our women's softball team is getting ready to open up actually this Sunday. They're going to have a meet the team and have a little softball clinic out at our field, so that's going to be something that's exciting because that's the first time that they've ever actually used that field. So we're progressing. We're doing a lot of things at the university here. We're excited about some of the things that we're doing. I want to bring your attention. If you look at the view book, Tom, hold that view book up, if you will. It's page 48 of the view book. That view book talks about pretty much anything that we do in the College of Applied Technologies. But if you turn to page 48 in that book, one of the things we wanted to point out is a typical ARCA race. We're the official training institution for ARCA, Automobile Race Club Association, and those are our students that are, I think that's Daytona, if I'm not mistaken. Those are our students working in professional pits and in race teams. Our students have been used for nationwide pit crews. They've been hired out for different races all over the country at different times. So, you know, as you go through, take a look through that book and see what you're, see what you can find out about the university, and certainly talk to us if you have any questions about that. One of the things that's really important, and the reason why we're all here today, is to collaborate together about the automotive industry and what we do, and we want to work together and network together to try to keep the business as local as we can. We need to make our community strong, and again, that's why this event is here at the university today. We're trying to pull everything together in the industry and work together to see what we all do and how we all work out, how we can work together. All right? And we want to keep our local economy strong. You guys all know that the technology is changing so much. We have telematics in our vehicles now, internet connectivity. We have electric vehicles. We have, natural gas is exploding around the country right now. And we teach all of that technology right here at the university. There are so many computer applications that we need to be on top of, and the technology, as you know, can be overwhelming depending on what area you're in. So we're excited to offer our students the opportunity to work together to learn the latest and greatest technology, and we send them out. We send them out to, how many of you, just by a show of hands, how many of you have any of our students employed at your facilities or companies or alumni, either one? There's a few hands up out there. That's good. We have them everywhere. We have them in NASCAR teams. We have students working at Ford, Chrysler, Honda, Toyota, all over the place. About any place that you can think of, the small shops, we have students there. We were down at Florida last year, and I went to a dealership, and I heard somebody yell across the shop, "Hey, Mr. O'Neill," and I'm like, that can only be a student. And sure enough, it was a student that went to University of Northwestern Ohio like 5 years earlier. And it's certainly satisfying to see that we have such a far stretch, in not only in the community here, but in the country. So that's neat. And we started about 760 students last Monday, and that's what we call our August session, and that's our largest start. So right now we're probably at about 4,300 students on campus between our College of Business and our College of Applied Technologies. So we're proud of that fact too. So it's there's always something fun going on out here, and it's always exciting. And one of the things I also want to point out, I had a couple people mention the building over on East Town Road. A lot of people go by the race shop out there, and we have our trucks sitting out there, and it's like a professional NASCAR shop that students have the opportunity to work at. And we did it that way on purpose. We wanted to imitate or mimic what they will see when they go out into the race industry. So that's always something neat that we work with our students. And another thing that is really exciting, the diesel industry is just exploding. I don't know how many of you know that we run classes 24 hours a day. We run 7:30 to 12:30, our morning class, 1 to 6 for our afternoon classes, 6:30 to 11:30 for our evening classes, and then midnight till 6:30 in the morning for our early morning classes. So we have that much of a demand that we're running classes all the way around the clock. So it's, well, the students are up anyway, right? Might as well keep them out of trouble. If they're in class, they're not causing trouble anywhere else. So that's, we offer, and that helps the students out too, because they have different work schedules. If they're working, we want to provide the opportunity for them to go to class anytime that, that they can go to class and still work within their work schedule. So anyway, we want to, again, welcome you to the University of Northwestern Ohio, and we will be offering tours later on. And now I would like to introduce to you the Mayor of Lima, David Berger. Thank you, David.
Well, good morning. It's great to welcome everyone today, and I want to say thank you to the University of Northwestern Ohio, Andy and Tom and everyone here who's been very hospitable in welcoming us here and opening up their facilities. And It is exactly on point that we're here in order for everyone here to know what's here, but it's also the case that our purpose today is to learn about everybody in the room and what our capabilities are. And we're really hoping that today's event is not a one-time event. We're believing and hoping that there is value to all of us from all of our communities in the region to know what our capabilities are in the related businesses in auto manufacturing and all that it entails. Because all of us happen to run into people all the time who say, "Oh, I didn't know you did that." And so we want to begin in a very deliberate and strategic way to overcome that kind of ignorance, frankly. And as we begin today, I'd like to do some introductions. We have several representatives of elected officials here who I'd like to acknowledge. Congressman Jordan's Representative Cameron Warner is here. I believe he will be coming. In fact, he's coming in the door. We should all clap as Wes Farbach comes in the door. This will surprise him. Okay? 1, 2, 3. Wes, that'll pay you for coming in late. Wes Farbach is Senator Portman's representative. It's good to have you here. And we also have Paul Bradley, who I'm going to invite up in a minute to also address us. He has a message from Senator Brown's office. And I don't know if Wes came prepared with a message from Senator Portman, but you'd be welcome as well. Also today, Shane Francis is here from the governor's office. Shane, it's good to have you here. Oh, Chase. I'm sorry, Chase Francis. Commissioner Corey Noonan is here from Allen County. Now, I do want to say that Corey was recently elected, and it was really his questions at our regular monthly meetings of the Lima Auto Task Force about how we are reaching out in the region that really led to today's event. And we created a subcommittee of which the Commissioner was a part and included Jeff Sprague from the Allen Economic Development Group, Jed Metzger from the Lima Chamber, and Judy Cowan, the president of the Ohio Energy and Advanced Manufacturing Center, to pull together this event today. Because we really believe it's important for us to become aware of and take advantage of the fact that we have so many experts in the region who are really making a contribution to the auto industry. Also, I want to introduce Tom Tebben. Tom is a Lima City Councilman. He's also a retiree from the Lima engine plant and also the owner of a business that services the Lima engine plant. Tom, it's great to have you here. We have, I know that Andy mentioned all of the displays relating to the university's racing teams, but we also have 10 other companies that brought displays, and we really hope that you're going to have the opportunity to walk through those displays, meet the company representatives that are here. The Lima Ford engine plant has an engine display, and folks are here to talk about the engine. Diamond Manufacturing and Colonial Surface Solutions has a display. Vanomatic, Rosewood Machine and Tool, Medicoat Corporation, Buckeye Machine, Veerhoff Machine, KTH Parts Industries, Honda of America Manufacturing Incorporated, and DTR. So great companies that are here that want to share information about what they do, and we want to encourage you to spend some time with them. And we have about an hour at the end of all the presentations for that to take place. And in order to get lunch, you have to go through the displays. There was method to that madness. Before I introduce the the prime speakers for today, I want to focus you to the bottom of the agenda because it says very clearly what our purpose is. The purpose of the summit is to foster the growth of the regional auto industry by sharing the expertise and resources of the Center for Automotive Research and by stimulating the interaction of our regional automotive-related business and industry. So we have a two-pronged attack here. The first is we're going to introduce you to a couple of the people who represent the experts at CAR, based in Ann Arbor. And there's a real reason for doing that, because long-term we think that team at the Center for Automotive Research can be really helpful to us as a region. And secondly, we are very deliberately wanting to stimulate an awareness of and a dialogue between and business between all of you and everybody else in our region. The invitations for today went to all of the auto industries, auto businesses in 10 counties, and that represented about 200 companies. So, not everybody's here today, but it's a beginning. And we really want to see today, not as an event in and of itself, but rather as the start to a long-term opportunity to do business with one another and to grow the prosperity and the vibrancy of the auto businesses in our region. About 10 years ago, Lima became a part of the Automotive Communities Program, which is a part of the Center for Automotive Research. And that happened because, frankly, John Parador, who was associated with the Lima Engine Plant, showed up in my office and on several occasions, and I was ignoring him for the most part, which you tend to do with John. So at some point he said, "Dave, I've got to have you meet Sean McClendon. Will you at least do that for me?" And eventually, after I listened to him a couple times, I said, "Okay, I'll meet with Sean." Didn't know who Sean was. I'm glad that I listened to John, and I'm glad I had the opportunity to meet Sean. And I think you will be glad as well. We eventually became a paid member of the Center for the ACP, and that gave us the opportunity to attend meetings in about a 6-state region where we would meet at plants around the region, OEMs, as well as primarily Tier 1s. And that represented folks like myself, mayors, economic development people, people not in the industry. And the whole purpose was to stimulate the knowledge base, to stimulate the cooperation among communities, and ultimately to retain and grow the auto business in the area of our country where it has been traditionally located. And by that I mean right here in Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, Missouri, and Kentucky. The whole idea is to keep what's here and to grow it, and to recognize that we've got competition elsewhere in this country as well as around the world. Well, having started when we did, we were prepared, frankly, in our region for what happened in 2008 and 2009. And when I say we were prepared to engage with our community to understand the importance of the auto industry. And I'll never forget that we did a 2-hour briefing for the editorial board of the Lima News. And if you're not familiar with the Lima News, at that time, it was a libertarian-owned newspaper for whom any type of public sector action and involvement in private commerce was anathema. And by virtue of our engagement with our education of the editorial board, we talked about the fact that in 8 counties, 16,500 people were employed in our auto industries. and that the importance of saving the auto industry was absolutely critical to every single community in our region. And we continued with that message. And ultimately, the Lima News editorialized in support of the bailout, a critical piece that I believe laid and made possible what we're now seeing. And I think we're going to hear about where we're now at with yesterday's sales numbers. Recently, the ACP began, about a year and a half ago, began to do, in addition to the meetings, which all take time. You got to go someplace, you got to spend the night often. I mean, it's an expensive way to stay engaged. They approached that information sharing in a different way, and they began to conduct a series of monthly conference calls. And there's probably 25, 30 on the conference calls each month. And we get briefings. We get data that is timely, it's important, and it really does focus us on the kinds of issues that we need to pay attention to as a part of our economic development strategies. And I'll just tell you, these are some of the topics related a little bit to what Andy had to say as he was talking about what the university is offering here. For example, one recent briefing, we focused on how Silicon Valley is moving to the ACP region. We talked about the importance of what's happening in IT because it's being incorporated into literally every component of manufacturing and our use of automobiles and transportation systems. Now, I don't know about you, but as a mayor, I never would have given it much thought that IT was going to be an important base of technology here. But in fact, that's what we need to be aware of as a community, as educational institutions, as parents who are raising our kids to become successful people. We need to understand that information technology is part and parcel of where the auto industry is going, and that's where opportunities are. We also learned at a recent conference call just how incredibly fortunate we are to be located where we are because of the transportation infrastructure that not only is here now, but is developing. When you look at what's happening with CSX Railroad and their investment in the North Baltimore yards, as well as what Norfolk Southern is doing in the Columbus area with their yards, and the opportunity to connect to ports on the East Coast and in the Gulf, and the opportunity then literally to connect to the rest of the world in more efficient transportation systems. We need to know that. Again, as communities, as businesses in these communities, we need to know where we are located really is a huge benefit to where we can go and where we may go in the future. And the last one that I'll mention to you, I had the opportunity to go to a plant in Canada. I've forgotten the location now. Ingersoll, Ontario, that's right. And this was my first time to visit the Canadian auto plant and to become aware at that point of just how important the Canadian auto industry is to us and how important we are to them, and that international border is an opportunity for us, and that we need to be aware of why we need to be in vigorous relationship with the Canadian auto industry. So today is intended to introduce you to two of the team, and there are more, from the Center for Automotive Research, who in fact I believe can not only deliver value to me as the mayor or to other public officials or economic development folks, but I believe to you as business leaders as well. So we're going to begin with Sean McLinden, and I just was querying Sean. Let me give you his some of the professional credentials that he has. Sean it's actually Dr. Sean McLinden, is the Executive Vice President of Research and the Chief Economist at the Center for Automotive Research. He completed his doctorate in economics at the University of Michigan, and we do not hold that against him. He worked for 4 years at the Industrial Technology Institute in Ann Arbor as a manufacturing economist. In 1989, he moved to the University of Michigan's Office for the Study of Automotive Transportation, and in the fall of 2000, he moved with the Office for the Study of Automotive Transportation to help create the Center for Automotive Research. Now, Sean is married. He's got 2 boys. He was a native Detroiter growing up on the east side. His father and his grandfather were also in the auto business, auto manufacturing business. But what I just learned that absolutely is very interesting is that his favorite pastime with his wife is fox hunting. Fox hunting. I thought you'd do that without your wife, but anyways, Sean, I want to invite you to come up and share with us your insights. You've seen Sean's name often if you were reading the national press, the Wall Street Journal, during the whole bailout episode. Sean was the spokesperson for the Center for Automotive Research in making the argument about the importance for federal action in saving the auto industry. Sean, Dr. McLinden, please come up.
Okay, so we got the clicker up. Oh, up here. Okay. Right, it goes that way. Morning, how are we doing? Great, beautiful morning in Ohio. Yeah, when we left that dark city up north, way up there, the flurries were coming down, and it was so dark I left my suit coat in the other car, and both cars carried the 3.5 double overhead cam. One of them, our car for the office, of course, is built in Canada, and the other, my car, in Mexico, but they carry a Lima motor. And as many do, a very successful engine. And obviously, I think Bernard's going to talk about what you're in possibly the running for, our understanding, here in Lima. Maybe something new coming down the pipe, as always. I'm going to talk about, my name is Sean McLinden. I'm the Executive Vice President of Research and the Chief Economist at CAR. I've been at the office since 1989, and we've got one of our pro auto analysts and ACP Associate Director, Bernard Zwicky, to follow me, and I'm going to give a presentation on sort of what CAR is, something on the auto industry, those beautiful sales numbers we had yesterday, fantastic, out of this world. Every major newspaper in the United States on the front page talked about our auto sales. It doesn't matter where, LA Times, New York Times, Boston Globe, all over the radio. Nobody expected us to have an average of over 16 million running, while the rest of the economy is running way behind us. People really want to buy new cars and trucks. As Bernard will point out, if Ford could make more cars and trucks, they would have sold 200,000 or 300,000 more vehicles this year. We're running tight. So I'm going to talk about why walk away, reinvesting in America's new auto industry and market. Try to say stuff that's specific to this region as well, this incredible region here in Central Ohio. The Center for Automotive Research is a not-for-profit. We're a 501c3. We are based in Ann Arbor. We have about 30 employees. We forecast industry trends. We advise on public policy. And we mostly, one of our largest activities is sponsoring communication platforms. Our research groups include one led by our president, Manufacturing, Engineering, and Technology, mostly focusing on lightweighting the vehicle this time, and working with the National Research Council and the National Academy of Science on fuel economy and technologies. We have a transportation systems group that does most of its work in connectivity and, yes, self-driving cars. We have an industry and labor analysis group that I work with a lot that does industry studies, and we have the group Bernard is part of that includes the Automotive Communities Partnership, our Sustainability and Economic Development Strategies group. So 4 groups, and we do a lot of different things. You know, up on our website, the publications are available going back for more than 13, 14 years on all of these different public policy and industry strategic issues, including some many technology issues as well. I won't go over them. We also run very large conferences and events. The largest industry management conference in North America in Traverse City every August, where the Automotive Community Partnership attends, you know, at hopefully a reasonable discount. And it's good. It lasts about 4 days. We've been running this conference, believe it or not, for 44 years consecutively. Right. And essentially, even before our office was basically started in 1978 on campus, where we were for 22 years before we spun off. And we have affiliates, not so much for the money, but for the communication, for the input, for the information they provide, for the guidance on our research activities. Actually, over half our budget is research contracts. Another 30% is conference attendance. And much of the rest is a fairly small affiliate grants, but it does include 65 companies. The largest affiliate group in Ann Arbor, I'll tell you that, on campus are off, including the OEMs Chrysler, Honda, Ford, Nissan, GM, Toyota, and Volkswagen. Okay, and as you can see, a fair collection of first-tier suppliers. Okay, and not enough of what we used to have back on campus of the smaller to medium suppliers that we have to listen to so closely today, as we found out in the last 4 years. The Automotive Communities Partnership is why we're here today. It has 35 regional economic development organizations from these states and the province of Ontario, 7 utility companies. We also have the companies join the partnership as well. That's why the meetings are held where they are. They're also at major strategic manufacturing plants and at company headquarters. The ACP has met, for example, in the Ford Executive Dining Room 3 times. Okay, and usually get a fair executive to speak to us or two. To basically, our logic behind that is the typical mid-size traditional automotive community is usually not large enough, big enough to get through the front door of these global transnational companies. But as a group, as a region, we always get in the front door, always. You know, because of the importance of the overall region. So we provide special analyses, objective advice, advice on best practices, basically a podium for our communities to speak directly to these companies, and hopefully some special attention and obviously resulting in investment. That's what our North American industry looks like today. The blue spots are basically suppliers, the red spots are OEM facilities, R&D facilities. Where would you say the geographic center of this industry is? Somewhere in I-75 in the middle of Ohio. Right, equidistantly. You know, real close to I-75. And more than 50% of all U.S. suppliers are located in those Great Lakes states. 90% of all Canadian, the entire Canadian auto industry is located in southeast Ontario. And of 100 suppliers in the top 100 suppliers in North America, 84% have headquarters in our region. Decisions are being made right here and close by, and that's what we have to arrange. These are our communities. You can see Lima over there on the right. They were one of the first communities to join in Ohio, right? Include places like NORAD, Defiance, and Toledo, Lucas County, Wood County, so on and so forth. Classic automotive regions of Ohio, as well as a fair selection from Indiana, Michigan, and Ontario as well. I would say those are the big regions for us, and include the economic development organizations as well. I'm not going to go over Kim's long list here. We don't have 2 days of the things we do at ACP. He's very proud of it. He couldn't be here today. He's actually chasing the Missouri governor in Kansas City today. So Bernard will be an excellent replacement. Instead, I'd rather talk about the auto industry. That's what my basic job is. With today's sales yesterday, in the first 8 months of 2013, our sales over 2012 are up by 9.5% in the U.S. market. We are on the verge of producing the 4th consecutive double-digit sales increase. Since the second quarter of 2009, the U.S. auto industry has produced over 20% of all economic growth in the United States. One industry. Okay? And that includes, on the private sector, it would be 40% of all economic growth in the private sector. You can see trucks have gotten fairly popular, again, with a 13% jump. And we're not talking cheap trucks, as you know. And cars still not doing too bad at 6.3%. We originally forecast with 21 other organizations back in January that we were going to slow down this year. We'd only see a 4 to 5% sales increase. That the sequestration was going to slow down, and the higher tax rates that came back, and slow income growth, and the heavy sales we had in the last 2 years were going to slow everything down. Didn't happen. In fact, people are spending more money per sale at the lowest incentive levels in 15 years, if not 25, $32,000 a vehicle on average rollaway. So in revenue, we're up by a lot more than ever before. Okay, is the auto industry back? In product, this is the finest product we've ever sold. The safest, the highest fuel economy, the shiniest, the most competitive Detroit small cars ever made, the best Hondas ever made. Okay? Right out of this state. Yes, we're back on product. Productivity is the highest on record. Every single OEM assembly plant in North America is on 3 shifts and now considering something silly called a 4th shift, which I don't even understand, and I wrote essays on this stuff. That means 24 hours, 7-day-a-week production. We got to get our component plants to that level as well, but they're headed there. Profitability, yes. We'll see that in a minute. Investment, yes, as Bernard's going to go over that in detail. Production, we're not quite back to the 17 million North American level. We have, however, got back to the U.S. production level of 2006 and 7. Okay, we're out of space. The question is, how can we go farther? Sales, not quite yet. If we ran the whole year like last month, I would say yes. Employment, no. No, that's the big laggard. No, we're not hiring the people that would be justified by these sales and by these production levels. We're working record overtime. Okay, so where are the jobs? When are they going to break through on hiring? Big question here in the manufacturing state of Ohio, as else in the ACP region. Okay, in terms of profitability, I will show you just one slide that should stun you. The blue line is profits in North America per vehicle for the Detroit 3, GM, Ford, and Chrysler, versus profits per vehicle for Toyota and Honda. And you can see in the bad old days, we didn't even have profits. We were losing $1,400 a car in 2006. That's that dark blue line on the left. And they were making $1,400. And you can see how bad it got in 2008 and 2009. We were losing over $3,000 a vehicle. Okay. For the last 3 years, the Detroit 3 actually out-earned the 2 largest Japanese companies by $1,000 per set of wheels. Do you think anybody in the country knows that? That's unbelievable. In fact, Ford, for a number of quarters, was running at $3,200 a vehicle. Don't tell the UAW. Well, I think they know. Right, we got a contract coming up. Here's the disappointment part. We haven't climbed back to those 06, 07 levels on unemployment. I'm showing 3 big states for us here. Because quite frankly, it's the tri-state area that's traditional. Ohio, Indiana, Michigan. That's where the auto industry was for 80 years. And Michigan didn't make the parts. No, we didn't. No, nothing under the vehicle, and a lot of stuff in the front and the back. We did not. The overall, we're at 681,500 auto manufacturing jobs in July 2013. You can see the record in '99 was almost 1.2 million. So we're not even half back. Oh, a little over half back on that. I'm not probably going to see that again. Michigan back up to 148,000 from a low of 95,000 in 2009. But in Indiana, not too bad, back to 70,000 in July. If there's someone growing slowly, it's Ohio at 81,500. Okay? That includes at the OEMs and the major suppliers and manufacturing jobs. We got to get going. And that number, which traditionally, as you see at Ohio, is over 100,000. About 20,000 short, tell you the truth. So, these sales are still improving. Why? Net household wealth is improving. We think that's a huge factor for the people in the market. Yes, I don't know the new unemployment rate at 8:30 this morning. I guess Bernard turned the radio off. But it was 7.4% in the last report. That's still a bit high for big auto sales, but obviously a big improvement over 2-3 years ago. We'll see in Ohio it's lower than that. Used vehicle prices, age of fleet, very high. Scrappage rate, really low, still below 5%. What we call auto density, a certain group of people in the United States is beginning to collect more than 2 vehicles a household. They're mostly people over 55. Are starting to actually not use a trade-in, but keep that third vehicle. And that's good for sales. Sales are high despite the highest prices we've seen in years. This really means pent-up demand. And the prices are so high, we're looking at record lease levels of getting close to 25% of sales are leases, and record loan rates. You can get an 84-month loan on that expensive pickup truck. Of course, it'll last 21 years, right? So you got 8 years to pay it off. Consumer confidence is steady but not high. We'll see in a minute. With that, of course, is a meteor in Russia. We always worry about things like that in our model for forecasting, because you should be able to forecast asteroid hits, if not tornadoes. Yeah, well, there's still some things we worry about. The economy is not growing fast. We never know whether it's going to stall or take off. There are more fiscal cliffs coming this fall in Congress. On the other hand, maybe not. The deficit is now in a level nobody thought it would be 6 months ago. Instead of $1 trillion deficit, it might be a $600 billion deficit. It sounds like real money, doesn't it? But it's half the size of what people thought it would be 6 months ago. We still have too many people unemployed and underemployed. States and cities are still cutting back. And, of course, corporations are nervous to hire. We got a problem overseas with developing economies for exports, and Europe has obviously not recovered. Those are all big macro reasons. We saw 2.5% at the end there growth rate in the second quarter. That obviously improved the 2 previous quarters, which were 1% or less. It's hard to predict. We're in a bouncy path since 2011 where the economy's going. Some quarters look terrible. Some are as high as 4.9, like in 2011 third quarter. I will say this. In the past, you've had about 3% economic growth to have strong economic auto sales in the United States. We haven't had 3% economic growth in the last 4 years. So why the strong auto sales? We're doing something we haven't done. It's sort of disconnected from the rest of the economy. And that really signals strong pent-up demand. People are buying no matter what at this point. They're tired of waiting, in a way. I will say this. Household net worth is back on a good track. What is net worth primarily comprised of? The value of people's homes. Number one, followed by their investment for retirement in the stock market and other financial markets. And house prices for the last, you could say 8 to 10 months have increased every single month. Okay? And this has given people confidence in certain areas of the country. One, they're not falling. So if they're increasing every month, they're not falling. Second, this might keep up. Will they get back to where they were? No. But it does give people a reasonable base on their real estate investment that's so important to them. Second, the stock market did recover. In fact, it recovered by 2 years ago. And it's a little retrenchment now because they're worried about interest rates from the Fed, but we expect them to get over that, and that restores those retirement portfolios for some of our most important buyers. Okay? So if you think that wealth is back, you're willing to make a bet on our product. You agree with that? Absolutely. I mean, gas prices, they're not low, but they're not spiking higher. Okay, they're not in this $4 to $5 to $6 range people worried about we might get to several years ago. They're staying in the mid $3.50 range. Okay, something to count on. Also making decisions for people on powertrain. Look how old cars are. 11.4 years old was a median for cars and trucks in July of this year, according to Poll. An all-time record. 11.4 years old. Of course, there are older cars in other countries. I'm showing you the famous Cuban cars. Someday we'll have cars like that. You know, the last new car to sell in Cuba was 1957. Yeah, they've got some good metal benders there to keep them running. But the essential point here is I'm not sure how much older they can get at 11.4. And I think a lot of people in the market are saying the same thing. Obviously, they're the most durable vehicles ever built in the history of the American auto industry. Or we couldn't even, over half, in other words, of 240 million vehicles on the road are older than 11 years old. Wow. So do we have some pent-up demand? Well, I think we do. Unemployment rates, you can see from the spike in 2009, way down. And in Ohio, down from 10.8 to 7.2%. Based on a recovery in manufacturing, frankly, to be congratulated in a lot of different areas, a lot of different industries, to say the least, not just auto. So let me get to the forecast. Forecasters, I can tell you, and this is just a small selection of the companies like ours that forecast, are a lot like sheep. When a couple of the sheep wander off, the rest of the sheep follow, right? They're not like horses all over the pasture, 2 or 3 in a group. They all go together. So we're spiking our forecast out for the year at about 15.7 million sales for 2013. I'll show you a few more years. The rest of them, I think, are catching up very quickly. Morgan Stanley at 16 million is the highest. But, in other words, we're going to be the sheep that moves out first, and hopefully the rest will start to follow and the like. And the companies haven't issued any new forecast for this year. The Ford forecast always includes heavy vehicles, full-size, Class 7s and 8s. So it's actually not as optimistic as it looks. And I think they're beginning to move to a public forecast that is higher for this year. Our forecast long run, like I said, actually shows an 8.3% increase for 2013. We see that going slowing down finally. We're going back to a slowdown model of about 16 to 16.2 million for 2014, 2015, and 2016. Why do we slow it down? We think these heavy price increases are eventually going to affect sales. Okay? And we know the companies don't want to run the incentive plans again. Okay? The extra capacity, the overcapacity that used to drive the rebates isn't there. We closed it in the restructuring. So we think we're going to slow down. Now, some of these cost increases, I'll be frank with you, are driven by government regulations on fuel economy technologies and safety. And they're going to be expensive, and we're not sure that the customer is going to really want them. Okay? So that's what's behind our forecast on production. We also see a 4.8% increase in the U.S. this year, and then a slowdown to just over the 11 million level in U.S. vehicle production through 2016. And part of that driven by the fact that we don't have the capacity to build more. Okay? It's an interesting industry. We have an assembly set of firms at the top, followed by Tier 1 suppliers who supply components like fuel injectors on the right or an H steering system on the left. followed by Tier 2 companies that build sub-assemblies, and then Tier 3 companies that build the very small parts. We've been used to this for 70 to 80 years. But there's a lot of technology heading at each tier to all of these parts. In safety, in connectivity, in electronics, in fuel economy, even in bio-based materials possibly, but certainly in advanced materials for lightweighting the car, the body, and the superstructure. In each case, that means a major change in manufacturing processes, changes in the kinds of engineering, change in the supply chain. Who's going to be building it? We don't even have mechanical engineers in Detroit anymore. We have mechatronic engineers. Okay? That's how electronic the vehicle will be. Massive use of new materials, like advanced composites and aluminum. We can tell from the tooling orders in the shops today. Different kinds of stamping, different kinds of casting, much more akin to the aerospace industry than in the past. All of that, CAR is trying to bring that kind of knowledge to the ACP. What's going to happen and where, in what vehicle, whether it's in materials, in driver assistance and connected vehicles, or in advanced powertrain and fuels. Okay, these are the technologies in question. And for example, in driver assistance, we expect that to be more successful, far more successful than electric cars. Electric cars failed because basically the product isn't like a car. So who wants it? I mean, it had no range. It takes hours to recharge. It was silly. Too dramatic of a change. A lot of money wasted on this. But these driver assistance trends, which leads to a connected, almost self-driving car, are going to roll out incrementally, one little bit at a time, and either get rejected or accepted by the consumer. That wasn't possible in an electric car. It was too much of a big change. And that stuff's going to get installed. Okay? It may not hopefully look this silly. But there's a lot of different stuff. I mean, it will even change the entire aftermarket. And once you place these technologies around the edge of the vehicle, they're non-repairable. We do a lot of work for AAA, for example, a car. Okay? How do you get to work? Where's the supplier industry right now? I'm going to finish on that. In actual fact, the according to Dave Andre at the OESA, we consider their chief economist easily, right, who's a big friend of the ACP, the top 25% of suppliers, there's about 25% of our suppliers at the second tier and first tier that are running over 90% utilization, even over 100%. And we're in danger at any one of these places that they're going to not make production, fail to ship, and lots of things will go down. That's where the tightness is. There's certain areas like casting, or even in tooling, okay, where we're flat out. I mean, you can't get them to, and they don't even know how to find space elsewhere, even down the road. And then the medium supplier at about 75% utilization, we actually think they should expand to take on this extra sales and production. And they have to be spoken to as well. And then there's a bottom quartile, according to Dave, that's running about 65%. They've got to transition to new work. Take some of that stuff on. Learn how to do that work at the top. Okay? A lot of discussion going on here in the supplier. Fix these constraints, grow these sectors, manage these transitions. What's most important for suppliers looking to expand today? According to the OESA surveys of the first tier suppliers, number one, availability of skilled labor. They just can't get people that know how to do the work. Number two, cost of skilled labor. Of course, they could get the people if they doubled the wage rate they're offering. We all know that. Will they? No. Why won't they? The customer won't let them. That's the real reason. Sure, you could say to Ford, I could get that work done if you let me offer those machinists, right, $45 an hour instead of $25 an hour. I'll find all the machinists I need. You can't put that in your bid. No, we're tracking labor costs good, okay? You see the frustration. Yeah, part of it's at the top, customer level. Next is availability of utilities and proximity of customer, okay, which is always important. How close are you? This area, our traditional area, our ACP area, should have this advantage on human resource investment in our community and technical colleges, in our four-year universities. In fact, one reason the Japanese, one big worry they had in 2009 during the crisis was if GM, Ford, and Chrysler went down, who would replace Purdue? Or Michigan or Michigan State or Ohio State's mechanical engineering programs, because they suck on them too. That's where the automotive knowledge at the base level is, not to mention the technical colleges. You know, it takes a concentration of an industry to produce that kind of human resources, and they don't have it down south. And they know that's their weakest point there, and they don't have it in Mexico. Right now, if the assembly people run out of skilled people, as you know, they take them from Tier 1. And when the Tier 1 people lose their people to the assembly companies, they take them from Tier 2. And what happens for the little guys at the bottom in the industrial park? They lose their vacation. No, they lose a lot more than that. This is a feeder chain that we've had for 80 years. You bet. You know, we don't have apprenticeship programs at Ford anymore, so if we need extra, and they're going to retire the last of their journeymen in 2 or 3 years, we'll just take them from TRW and data. Boom. And where are they going to get their people? On and on. I've pointed out some problems. I've pointed out some opportunities. I think we've got a lot of double-digit growth left. I think this is the best place on the planet in terms of the cost of skilled labor, land, utilities, knowledge, to build the most profitable, highest priced automotive products on the planet. You'll hear a lot about China being the largest automotive industry in the world at 34 million sales in a couple of years, but the average vehicle there sells for $16,000. We'll be at $35,000, and our vehicles make $3,000 a pop after taxes. They're not even 1/6 of that. That's a lot of profit. That's a lot of sales, and that makes us still the biggest auto industry in the world and the biggest automotive market. Stop thinking units, start thinking money, and that's where it is. And we got a lot of frustrated people out there with old wheels. Our government just gave us $123 billion to this industry by 2010. And all that complaining about the Japanese and Europeans getting subsidized for decades, they gave us $123 billion. We're not going to see that happen again for 100 years. And I don't blame American taxpayers for not wanting to see it again. But why walk away now? Why walk away from the auto industry? Why say, well, they've let us down, it's been a tough road the last 20 years? No, this is not the time to walk away. This is the time to say, thanks. Use it. Don't waste it. And I've got time for me to welcome Bernard up here, because I've gone on too far, right? No? I'm dead on? How can that be? I can use a 44 regular, by the way, if anybody got an extra call today. Thank you very much. Sure, Q&A? Well, I think we're going to take it after Bernard's done to make sure he gets his stuff in there. Okay.
Thank you, Sean.
Mike Boston.
Well, Sean, thank you very much. That was a great, insightful presentation, and delivered with your own inimitable style, as always. And I know the folks at Ford who have had several town hall meetings with Sean have also appreciated hearing from you again. I want to now, we heard earlier that Kim Hill, the director, is not able to be with us today, but his associate and assistant director, Bernard Sawicki, is here, and I want to introduce him. Bernard is the assistant director of the Automotive Communities Program at CAR, and he also holds the position of senior project manager in CAR's Sustainability and Economic Development Strategies Group. He's been with CAR since 1994. He is a graduate of the University of Michigan and also Eastern Michigan University. Now, for all the single ladies in the room, Bernard is single. He enjoys long walks on the beach, and he cooks. I think he might even iron his own shirts. So we're looking forward to hearing from you, Bernard. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dave. Okay, well, after that intro, I'm not sure where to exactly go, so I think I should dive into the content right away. To give you an idea of what I've prepared for you, it's basically based on what we heard from Mayor Berger that would be important to the folks in this room. So one is a look at the latest automotive sales and production numbers. Literally just came out the day before yesterday, so we had folks working on crunching this late into the night. So it's literally hot off the presses, and it is hot stuff that's getting a lot of national attention. And then I've got a lot of customized information on Ohio specifically. So we'll get into investment. We have something at CAR specifically for the ACP called the Book of Deals. And that is really unrivaled anywhere in the country that we're aware of. Basically, we track all automotive investment by the automakers and everything of note by the suppliers, where it's going, what the incentives are, what the employment implications are, and so on. And we can boil that down to any format that you want to see. So I've got a lot of Ohio-specific content in that regard as well. And then at the end, a little bit about the freight situation in the region, how that serves as an opportunity, particularly critically for Ohio, given Ohio's central location and proximity to the rest of the industry. Just as a little caveat, more than half of this presentation is custom just for this show, so I've never shown these slides before, so forgive me if if it goes a little bit rough. Okay, so we were going to start kind of a big picture and work our way to more and more specific stuff. This is the long-term market share for the Detroit 3. And so what you'll see is if this goes back all the way to 1985, yes, it's been a drastic reduction. And I won't get into the specific numbers, but basically, if you go back far enough, we had a situation where GM was twice the size of Ford, Ford was twice the size of Chrysler, and really they amounted for the lion's share of the market in this country. Everyone else was kind of negligible. The one thing that I'll finish off on this slide with is this. Those lines stop declining at the end. Okay, we have been able to arrest this decline, and we're now actually, in a lot of cases, growing this market share back up. So at one time, yes, these companies were sort of the lion's share of the market in this country. Here's a little bit more of an accurate look as far as what it looks like today. Today, if you're going to talk about this, you really need 7 companies, right? It's kind of our new big 7. And why these companies specifically? Well, that's because if you add them up, they're about 86%, a little over 86% of the market in this country. And everyone else put together combines for the remaining 14%. So if you know what's happening with these guys, you've got a pretty darn good idea. So a few things come out when looking at this chart. First of all, look at the concentration. Okay, it starts in 1999. And at that time, the largest company, GM, 29% market share. The 7th, less than 2. Okay, and look at the concentration now. 18% versus 8, only 10% of market share separate our largest company from our 7th largest. So we have a lot of competition. Okay, that's at the end of the day, this means increased competition. This means kind of a lack of a situation where you have a couple of monsters and then everybody else. Suddenly everyone resembles everyone else more closely in scale, which means for economic development purposes you've got to do quite a bit more hunting and so on. Without talking about the individual companies here, one key performance that I just want to point out quickly is, and I don't think I do have a laser pointer here. No, but that would be Hyundai. They start here at 1.8%. They end up at 8.2%. But interestingly, you see their numbers kind of fizzing out and tailing off at the end. And that is largely due to a global capacity crunch. I'll give you a little bit on that. But really, if there's any sort of a good, really positive performance here, it's those guys as well as Nissan, though Nissan's isn't quite as drastic. So here's a somewhat complex slide. Really, the main point is not the columns in blue. They represent monthly sales levels, but those kind of fluctuate seasonally. The real takeaway, I think, is that red line. That's the SAR, or the seasonally adjusted annual rate, which is an extrapolation from a given month done via complex spreadsheets and so on, of basically what to expect for the year based on that month. It gives us an annual rate. So what do we expect? First of all, note how long we've been above 15 million. It started last fall. So we've got that strong positive trend, very much what Sean was talking about earlier. And he also mentioned to you how hot of a month August was, to the point where the SAR reached 16.1 million units. That's the best level we've had since early 2007. And as he mentioned, this is on the most expensive vehicles we've ever sold. So, by the way, as good as this month was, in terms of volume, it's not the best month we've ever had. But considering that these are the most expensive vehicles we've ever sold, at over $31,000 per unit, this is actually a record month in terms of revenue. Never have we sold this many dollars worth of cars. We sold more units, never more dollars. So that is a very good indicator for the industry. That's more revenue coming into all tiers of that supply chain, not just the automakers. So a very solid performance. And by the way, this is a large part of why Sean mentioned those forecasts being revised in an upward direction. This is a very solid performance without the crutches of incentives, 0% down, no payments for a 6-month, all that jazz that we were doing a decade ago. And basically crippling our profitability, we're not doing now, and despite that, we're selling this well of vehicles that are this expensive. So this is quite a remarkable performance. Year to date through August, so this is the first 8 months for these automakers that I've got here for you. And again, that's the big 7. So this is the percent change for those companies. I'll give you their market share coming up next. What you'll see is total market 9.5% increase, and everyone is clustered fairly closely to that average of 9.5%, with maybe 2 companies standing out. Ford, better than average, growing about 13% so far. More on that coming. And as I mentioned, Hyundai Kia, capacity constrained, shortages of certain hot products. Their factories in the U.S. are at about 110% capacity utilization. So they could sell more if they had more product. And increasingly, other automakers are running into that same problem. Ford's Fusion is a great example. They're adding that production in Flat Rock, Michigan, hopefully alleviating that. But we have situations where, yes, Ford could have sold more if they had more of those vehicles. Chevy, that new Impala, also inventory shortages at this point. There are other vehicles, and a lot of this sort of varies geographically as well. So I mentioned market share. This is how it shakes out so far this year for these companies. So what you've got, GM 18% market share, Ford about 2 points below that, and so on. This is the big 7, so obviously this should add up to 86.1% of the market. And you can see this has been kind of the pattern recently. However, what's interesting is if you take those numbers and below them, slot just August, okay, just August, and how that varies. And that gives you an idea of momentum. How is this changing? Who's gaining? Who's losing? And a few key things jump out, and it's really quite remarkable how it's kind of changing so dynamically. First of all, if you look, Ford and Toyota. Last 2 months, Toyota has outsold Ford. Which is interesting. And by the way, not so much because Ford products are doing poorly. They're not. They're selling like hotcakes. It's more a question of can we get the right inventory. Likewise, last month, Honda outsold Chrysler. Nissan outsold Kia. So we have sort of changes happening in this horse race that are taking place. So it's interesting how different the picture is when you look at August and what's happening very freshly, very recently, now that sales are at this kind of more feverish pace, than what I just showed you in year to date. So, you know, for nerds like us, this is exciting stuff. This is dynamic things happening in the industry. We kind of thrive on this stuff. All right, so Detroit 3 market share. Really, as I told you, the great erosion has stopped. So what have we got right now? Basically, stability. Settling in about that 45-44% rate for the three of them combined. You might be wondering about this point here. When it got over 50%, that's the tsunami in Japan. When, yes, the Detroit 3 partially, but not nearly as badly as the Japanese automakers, they were impacted much harder by that tsunami, by inventory shortages, not just of cars, but of components and so on. So that was just a little bit of a gift temporarily to the Detroit 3. They took full advantage. Their market share rose, but afterwards things kind of normalized again. So this is kind of the new norm. One little story that I want to tell you, that tsunami in Japan, and this ties a little bit into what I was saying about Hyundai and their inventory shortages. About 2 months after that tsunami in Japan, I was in Korea. And at the time, everyone was saying that the key beneficiary of that tsunami in Japan were going to be Hyundai and Kia in Korea. That the folks who walked into a Honda or a Toyota dealership couldn't get those cars are going to go down the street, they're going to buy a Hyundai or a Kia instead. So there was all this talk of sales booming at Hyundai Kia. And Director Yoon runs their strategy group, and I either do dinner or lunch with him usually when I'm there. And he was almost ticked off by this talk because he said, do you know how many actual extra units we're going to sell because of the tsunami? 0, right? They literally, globally, back in 2011, were already planning to sell every single thing they could produce. Okay, so no extra units. But of course I told them, yeah, but obviously you're going to decrease incentives, you're going to raise prices, you are going to make money as a result, and they have. But this capacity crunch is not a new story. It goes back years, at least 2 years, if you kind of follow the statistics. All right, so production, also worth mentioning. Ford, again, sort of going consistently with sales, significantly above last year. Hyundai, Kia eking out all they can. Of course, this isn't enough to help them keep their place in the market. They're also importing vehicles and so on. And then basically everyone else sort of falling in, and quite a few companies basically flat with where they were last year. So this is our production sort of history, and I'll show you specifically for Ohio how this is shaking out for the state. So here we go into the Ohio specific content. And first of all, we talk investment. And there are really two impacts of investment. One is the actual value of the investment going in. And two, it's the jobs that are either retained or generated new by that investment. So I have statistics on all of those things coming up. We'll talk about the absolute levels, but I wanted to start with just share. So this is Ohio's share of announced automotive investment for these years starting back in 2007, because I wanted to pick a point before the global financial crisis. And all of these go year to date for 2013. That's why that asterisk is there. So first, we just give you Ohio's share, and that came up in our conversation with Mayor Berger. Basically, is Ohio getting its share? So what you'll see is, one, you may be surprised by this. 2008, basically economic quagmire. Why the heck is Ohio doing that well? Well, this was two things. One, it was the announcement of the Lordstown reinvestment for the Chevrolet Cruze. Huge investment, huge jobs impact, so that drove that number up. Also, Honda had a major announcement for Anna, Ohio. So that's what explains these wonderful looking 2008 numbers when really mostly the industry was not investing. But share-wise, Ohio did very well for those two reasons. But recently, things have kind of stalled out a little bit, much steadier. And this dovetails exactly with what Sean was showing you in terms of employment. Okay, Sean was showing you total employment, and you can see it isn't rising very highly, and the part that's rising is what we're seeing here, right? These investments generate jobs, and what you'll see is here's investment, Here's employment. Okay, these are those jobs. How many new ones are we either keeping or retaining as a result of these investments? And what you'll see is that same story being told, particularly for 2013. Ohio getting about 5% of this on a nationwide basis, and it looks like, and I'll give you more detail on this, we won't be able to match 2012's performance, just as one example. So that was share, okay? That was Ohio's share of the national picture. What I want to give you now is the absolute levels. What is the actual investment? What is the actual employment? And just as importantly, how's that broken out between automakers and suppliers? So one, we start with the actual investment, okay? Number of dollars. So you can tell 2008 and 11 were very good years for Ohio. And you can see most years the automaker investment dominates that of suppliers. So really 2012 and 13, there's that sort of story of just steadiness. 13 isn't really sort of trouncing what we saw in 2012, despite the fact that really on a North American basis, sales and production are big in a major way, right? So this is investment in millions. And I show you the same chart basically, but now we're talking jobs, okay? Employment and how that shakes out. And again, that sort of breakout between what's coming from an automaker investment and what's coming from a supplier investment. So what you'll see is, again, 2013 year to date, so we've got 8 months worth of data, and it looks like we won't be able to keep pace with what we did in Ohio in 2011 and 12. And again, completely consistent with what Sean showed you. Basically, a little bit of a flatlining of that growth in Ohio. So basically, the idea is now, okay, we've done well in getting to this point. What happens now? How do we take care of opportunities, making sure that we do get our share of growth? I told you a second ago that I'd have production statistics, and I've got a few different slides on this, and they're all Ohio specific. Then we get Lima specific in a moment. But basically the big categories are vehicle, engine, and transmission. And obviously engine is near and dear here in Lima, so I saved that for last. On the vehicle side, basically you can see 2010. I also gave you the forecast through 2015. This is from LMC Automotive. So you can see things coming back up nicely. Okay, and by the way, this is production, obviously following that sales increase. Oh, and actually I just remembered one more thing I wanted to tell you, which is this. Sales-wise, what you saw in Sean's presentation, we bottomed out sales-wise in 2009 at 10.4 million. Well, guess what? This year, through the first 8 months, we've already sold 10.6 million. So literally in the first 8 months, we've outsold all of 2009. That's just one more powerful statistic that tells you to what degree we really are back. Okay, back to this slide. So what you've got basically is a steady increase. Don't read too much into that slight drop in 2015. That's basically 100,000 units, which happens basically caused by which factory is changing over at which point. You can't really read a trend into something like that. So basically a return to producing about 1.4 to 1.5 million vehicles in Ohio. And you know, obviously a very strong comeback from the previous levels. Transmission production, also looking very strong. Number of transmission plants here. Basically 3 million units produced and coming back quite strongly. And obviously here in Lima we want to talk engine. Total engine production in Ohio looking quite solid. Don't forget that we've got also Honda producing both vehicles and engines and so on. And actually Sean told you he's got 2 vehicles with Lima engines. A couple of months ago I bought actually a Honda Accord Coupe made in Marysville, also an Ohio engine. So Sean and I are doing our best to prop up the local economy. So total engine production in Ohio approaching 2.5 million for this forecast window. And if you want to know about that specifically for Lima, this is how it shakes out. Keep in mind the bottom axis is 250, so this is kind of this makes the changes seem bigger than they are. So basically, peaking about 450,000 units, slight decline, basically for the purposes of getting a new generation of a high-tech V6. So that, in terms of volume, is one small decrease, but in terms of content and the value of that engine is hopefully an increase. But that is something that is certainly going to be big here for the local economy, and you can see that it's basically maintaining. And by the way, I looked at the rest of this forecast going forward, and it does stay at about 400,000 units per year, so basically steady. All right, so basically we have a situation where Ohio has done well getting to this point and sort of taking care of the industry. Where are the opportunities? Where does the chance for growth come in? And we've heard both from Mayor Berger and from Sean the central location of Ohio. And what opportunities does that give you? Well, one, I think this sort of phrases it well. The Great Lakes region, especially when you include the Canadians in that, and let's face it, because of NAFTA, they are absolutely integrated. Okay, basically, it's the largest bilateral trade relationship in the world, and Ohio is right there. And a lot of that trade is automotive, and obviously that's powerfully located in Ohio. So those two things together are an opportunity. Another opportunity is the fact that right now the big bottleneck is Chicago and the freight situation there when you look at trains coming in. And by the way, you might sort of think if you start with Lima and put Chicago there, that Chicago would only be a problem on eastbound freight coming in from the West Coast. Actually, quite often, things coming in from the east will have to shoot past Ohio, go to Chicago, be repackaged, and then come back. Okay, and it takes days. Once something starts like arriving in Chicago, it takes days for those trains to be separated and repackaged to come back. So this sort of bottleneck in Chicago is an opportunity for us to do so much more of those freight connections here in this region, and Ohio's central location plays right into that. So I was asked to tell you a little bit about this. This is that CSX North Baltimore facility that Mayor Berger mentioned, and this is something that I think portends of what is to come. Currently, to the latest that we could find, about 200 employees there. However, growing to about 2,000 as the years roll on. And it's growing for the reasons that I sort of told you about in Chicago, but you could see the connections, okay? Now we can have these shipments sort of packaged locally and going to local destinations. This is music to the ears of the companies right now for a number of reasons. One, fuel costs are rising. Two, just-in-time demands are growing in the factories. Everything must be shipped within a tighter time window. Also, there are things you may not know about. For example, the Panama Canal is being expanded. And what that means is larger ships inbound from China that right now can only stop on the West Coast, they can't come to us because the Panama Canal is too small. But once that canal is expanded, they will be able to stop on the eastern seaboard. And that gives us an opportunity to handle that freight here if we have the right facilities to do that. And this one right here is a powerful step in that direction. And then basically at the end, there's reason to mobilize. So we've sort of got this opportunity. Carr did some back-of-the-envelope calculations, and basically it's hundreds of thousands of jobs when you include the spin-off employment. That could be sort of in the making if we play our card rights when it comes to this. And the other thing is, keep in mind, it's not like the folks in Chicago or Baltimore don't know that they are bottlenecks and that their problems present opportunities for us. They know, and they're moving to resolve those bottlenecks. So before they get their act together too far, we should be taking advantage of this opportunity to make sure that we do get our ducks in a row. I did want to also add the fact that So it's key that Ohio kind of sees the opportunities that it has, that it nurture relationships with the automotive industry. At the ACP, we're happy to be a part of that. And I also want to point out, Lima is very much doing it right. The ACP is kind of a regional body. It's all of the Great Lakes region, and you don't know how often we have held Lima and that task force out as an example to other communities. Quite often, these conversations don't start until Company A says, we're closing your plant, and it's a final decision. And then at some point, a community decides to wake up, put a task force together, and engage with the company. After the closure is already announced, and then they come to us for help. Lima is a fantastic example of a community that did those things not because of an announcement, but to be proactive and get on top of it. So quite often, this is the example that we give our other members of what you should be doing. So to the degree that it's possible, it's nice to see it happening, and we're glad that CAR and the ACP can be part of that communication between Lima and the industry. So with that, that takes me to the end of my scheduled comments. I think perhaps now we should have Sean come back up, and he and I are both able to take any questions you might have on one of the things that we talked about here, but also other stuff. If you've got an item of interest, we either know it or we can make up something that'll sound convincing. Yeah, yes, sir. Yeah, as I mentioned, that. Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry. The question was the production forecast that I showed included a very slight dip in 2015. And so the question is, what's the basis for that, given that, just as an example, in Toledo, there's a new Jeep Cherokee coming online that's adding employment in that regard. And so the reason for that is, as I mentioned, changeovers in other plants. So I believe at that point in 2015, GM will be changing over Lordstown and possibly at Honda. And so I mentioned it when I showed the slide. That was a small dip of about 100,000 units. So it's not at all unusual for those kinds of dips to be caused by changeovers and temporary production halts that are then resumed, as opposed to an overall downward trend, which that certainly does not indicate. Yeah, and I'd have to check, but I believe the Wrangler might also be changing at that point as well, once the Cherokee's in place. And so those moves will explain, those basically it's 100,000 units out of 1.5 million. So those kinds of movements can easily be explained by changeovers. Yep, yes, ma'am. Really, you've had massive movement on the part of Honda. And don't forget Honda also on two things. One, you've got the actual investment from them, but quite a bit of supplier investment that is related to that. So obviously Ford, GM in Sharonville, Chrysler in Toledo, most recently Chrysler making a big investment in that facility in Toledo for the new Cherokee. So you've got kind of a wonderful mix of players. But because that happens, you also get the supplier investment. The other thought is, for example, it's not only the automaker investments in Ohio. Honda specifically cited the Greensburg, Indiana Civic plant. Where it is, it's right on the Ohio border because it's close to that Ohio supply base. So no, Ohio didn't get the plant, but Ohio will get supplier employment and supplier revenues coming in specifically for that reason. So you have to keep in mind it's such an integrated industry that all of these things have regional dynamics. Yeah. Mm-hmm. No. If you're going to ask, something like, is it because Michigan announced or passed right to work? No, things like that we don't think are impacting things just yet. That'll be a possible gradual effect that'll come in place. So the actual shakeout that I showed you, and it depends on your timeline, but as I mentioned, here it is in terms of investment in millions for Ohio specifically. So yeah, in 2013, there definitely are Ohio investments. I think it depends on where specifically you look. And if you'd like more detail, obviously we have this to the absolute granular level. So if you want to contact me afterwards, I can actually have our staff go in and tell you exactly where those things are and what the companies that are involved in them are. So I think certainly it's not the case that Ohio is not getting. It's a question of, is that enough for you? And obviously I know the answer will be no, you'd want more. Yeah.